Here's a disclaimer, okay? I have to tell you this, not only for my sake, but also for the sake of legalities. I'm not a financial planner. I'm not giving you financial advice. I am not telling you to do or not do anything. Today is simply information. The thing I am telling you to do, actually, is go to the Word, trust what God says, do not fear, be strong and courageous, and believe that God is everything and everyone, or He is all that He says He is. Is that fair? All right, amen. So let's start like we did last week. Last week was part 1. This week is part 2. Last week we talked about AI, artificial intelligence. Tonight we're going to talk about cryptocurrency, and then we're going to put them all together and say, okay, why is this a big deal? What does it mean to us, or does it even mean anything to us at all? Especially, why are we doing this in a church? What the heck does AI and cryptocurrency have to do with people of God and followers of Jesus? So let's start by this. If you would say that your knowledge on a scale of 1 to 10, if your knowledge of cryptocurrency is about a 1 to a 3, let me see your hands. I just want to know who I'm talking to, okay? The majority of us. Congratulations, you're like pretty much the rest of the world. If your knowledge, would you say, is 4 to a 6, let me see your hands. Okay, so you know a little bit, maybe not as much as you want. Okay, how many of y'all would say you're a 7 or an 8 of information and understanding of crypto? Anybody? Okay, any 9s or 10s? No. So that's a very common response, to be honest with you, because what we find is that these new technologies, even though they've been around for a long time, there's a very long runway for them to get up in the air. How many of you have seen the meme that is actually a false meme on Facebook where Dave Ramsey is saying, hey, be careful of a cashless society, blah, blah. How many of y'all have seen that? Okay, don't tell me if you shared it, because it's actually not true. He didn't actually say that. But I get it. I get the fear that comes with it. That's why understanding and knowledge is where we're going to start. So tonight is AI, crypto, and the end of the world. Cryptocurrency. What is it? Where did it come from? How does it meet the questions of the last days? We're going to do 8 stops tonight. Okay? These 8 stops is this is our roadmap. And again, we have less than 60 minutes to do this, and so I want to say that we're not gonna teach you to sail a sailboat. What we're going to do is we're going to help you build a sailboat, and we're going to help you get it in the water. We're going to help you put the sails up, and we're going to give it a shove. My goal tonight is to get you hungry and thirsty to go deeper into what God's Word says about why this matters. So just know that we're not going to cover it all. We're going to kind of scratch it. But you know what you do when you get an itch and you scratch it? What happens? It itches more, right? So that's the goal. I want you to get hungry for knowing, hey, how does this stuff fit? Here's why. Because there's coming a day, sooner probably than later, where there will be the majority of conversation is going to be this. And it's really, really soon. There are some things in Congress right now that when it turns the corner, when they pass it or do whatever they do up in Congress, it is going to be the topic of the 5:30 news, and it's going to be the thing that you talk about at work. And if you have a grasp on it, and you enter into that conversation, and you're able to bring some biblical, common sense, sane, peaceful wisdom, you're going to become a person that's the expert in the room to where you can help them make good decisions. That is a good place to be. So here's our path tonight. We're going to look at what it is, where it came from, the system we have, what people fear, where it works, what the law says, surveillance in AI, and then look into Revelation 13. We're actually going to look at, well, I want to tell you about 3 passages where this really comes in. One is going to be Daniel chapter 7. The other one is going to be 2 Thessalonians chapter 2. And the third is going to be Revelation chapter 13. We'll pretty much stick with 13, but I want you to have those other 2 references so you can go back and look at them. And what that tells us is Jesus understood what was going to go on. John, the Revelator, understood what was going to go on. They didn't know exactly, maybe Jesus did, but when they were writing this, they didn't know how to exactly say the details. They just saw a picture. But way back in the Old Testament, Daniel had a vision of what was going on. So this is nothing really that's new. So let's start. What is cryptocurrency? Cryptocurrency is a term that is used to describe what is now termed digital currency. Okay? The term cryptocurrency, when most people hear it, they think of what? Bitcoin. Believe it or not, cryptocurrency starts with Bitcoin, but there are thousands of digital assets that exist. My opinion, the majority of them are junk. The majority of them are just a way for people to create a currency that they can make a bunch of money and run. But there are a handful of them. Handful is defined by however, time will tell what handful means. There are a handful of them that actually have a use case and will become a part of everyday life. Now, you might stop me right here and go, hey, wait a minute, time out. There's no way that this is actually going to happen. Folks, you don't have people like BlackRock. You don't have the Federal Reserve. You don't have the SEC, not the football, but the other, Securities and Exchange Commission. You don't have the President of the United States saying things like, we're going to make the U.S. the crypto capital of the world if it's not going to happen. Would you agree? Like, too many people with a whole lot of money and a whole lot of power are already talking about this and are already making plans and have been making plans for long enough that this isn't a, maybe we can stop it from happening. This is a, it is going to happen. We've just got to figure out how we're going to deal with it. So cryptocurrency basically is digital money. It's a digital means of exchange. That's essentially what it is. And it's accounted for by what's called the blockchain. The blockchain is a system of consensus or a system of proof that a transaction actually happens. The blockchain, though, is more than just cryptocurrency. The blockchain is used to validate agreements. So right now, there's a lot of work being done with digital contracts that will be validated on the blockchain. And when they're validated on the blockchain, you can skip a lot of the process and a lot of the hassle of what now has to happen. If you want to buy a house and you get a loan, what do you have to do? You got to go through the realtor, or you got to go to a lawyer, you got to have your own documents that are drawn up, and then you got to go to the finance company, then they got to spend a week trying to get these paperwork done, and then you got to sit in a room and you got to sign them over and over. Have you ever wondered why in the world you had to sign for an hour to buy a house? And then somebody else has got to do it. And with the blockchain, it's done in what could be seconds rather than days. So it's about speed and efficiency and also cost. And it's about actually being a more secure transaction. So here's what it looks like. Oh, go to that next slide, sorry. So the blockchain is a chain of validations or a chain of blocks, okay? That means it's validated here, it's validated here, it's validated here. And so contrary to what you've probably heard on the news, cryptocurrency is not so that people can do nefarious things and not be tracked. Cryptocurrency actually can be tracked and has been responsible for taking down enormous nefarious people, because there's a chain that validates the transaction. Now, the anonymity on one side, they do have to get through, but at the end of the day, they can get through it. It's really quite fascinating. But for what it's worth, you've got all of these different blocks, and those blocks are validating that a transaction has happened. Go to the next one. Let me show you. There are actually 3 ways that these transactions are validated. There's actually more than that, but there are 3 primary ways. One is called proof of work. That means that, let's say I sell something to Bob, and I give Bob $100. Proof of work means all of you out here, you're going to get to work and you're going to try to validate proof that I gave him $100. And the first one to get it, the first one to prove it, you get rewarded by an asset, typically Bitcoin. And so you validate it first, you get some Bitcoin. That's why you've heard of these things called data mine or crypto mining or mining centers. What mining is actually validating the different proofs. And so the thing about that is it's very slow, and it's very, power intensive. Like, you have to have these massive spaces in order to do it. And it's getting harder and harder and harder to make the money, because what they did was When Bitcoin was started, they said there's going to be 21 billion. That's it. It's a limited supply. And as the Bitcoin is mined, which is, I guess, a way of saying as it's introduced into the system, every time you hit a certain level, we're going to reduce the amount of Bitcoin each miner gets. And so at this point, since it's been going on for over 10 years, let me see, it's 2008, so how many years is that? Almost 20 years. The amount that you get on, it doesn't make sense to get into that anymore. So that's one way, proof of work. Proof of stake, validators are chosen by the stake of coins they lock up. So in other words, I would take my assets and I'll put it into the pot, and that kind of gives me buy-in. And if I'm the first with the most assets, then I can validate it and I'm the winner. I get rewarded financially for that. The third is a consensus. This is where you don't have the proof of stake or the proof of work, but you have a consensus of individual validators. Now, I only tell you that to tell you this. There actually is a system of accounting for digital currency. It's not like just imaginary money in the air, it's mathematics. Now you would say to me, or somebody would say, well, how do we just assign value to an imaginary coin? Right? That's a valid question, right? I would ask you this. How do we assign value to an imaginary piece of paper? Like, what makes that valuable? Can anybody tell me?
Treasure.
Yeah, supposed to be gold, but that hasn't been the case since the 1970s. Essentially, this right here has zero value except that we have a military that's bigger than anybody else. And we made some deals with oil and some things like that. That's it. So the argument of who gives it its value, well, value really is kind of like beauty. It's in the eye of the beholder. It's people agree on what the value is, and when they agree on what the value is, well, that's what the value is. How many of y'all wear a diamond? You can show it, right? How do you value? Where does a diamond get its value? Like, what makes a diamond value? It's a rock. What makes that different than, say, a rock that you pick up in the parking lot out here? Well, because somewhere along the way, somebody said, hey, these diamonds are rare, precious rocks, and we're going to cut them in certain ways, and we're going to make a scale of how to grade them, and we're going to create an industry that says value is based on these criteria, and all of us have believed it. They say diamonds is a girl's best friend, is what they say. I told my wife, babe, I'll get you a really nice diamond, or we can eat for the first year. It's your choice. I literally told her that. And she's like, well, I think we'll eat. By the way, you want to know who made the rule that a diamond for an engagement ring should cost 3 months' salary? A diamond broker. Yeah, it was not a groom, I promise you that. It was somebody going, hey, how can we sell these things for more money? So value is placed based on what society, what a group of people decide to place on it. That's what's happening with cryptocurrency. So whereas you have Bitcoin as the first, you have all these other tokens or all these other cryptocurrencies, or what we'll call digital assets, because that was a made-up name, digital assets, just to make the public feel better. Because cryptocurrency had a bad connotation, so they go, hey, let's think of a way that we can sell this better. Oh, digital assets, that's what we'll do. And so the way that these things were validated is important, but you need to know where it comes from. In 2008, we don't know if it was a person or a group of people. Some people think it was the CIA. Some people think that this whole thing was a sham as a way to change our financial system. Who knows? But this person or persons named Satoshi wrote a paper. And in that paper, it described a new form of currency that would go against what we currently have in our own system, which was perceived to be where certain people control everything, certain people get everything, and it's very unfair, and it is used for manipulation and control by governments. So what if we create this thing over here that is outside of the government's ability to control us and to devalue what we have? That was the pure thinking supposedly behind it. And so Bitcoin was created. And back in the day, you could buy one Bitcoin for like 0.0017 cents. Today, it's worth, I didn't look at the numbers today, but it's worth about $55,000 for one. Here's what's interesting. The first item to ever be purchased, like over the counter with Bitcoin, was a pizza in Florida. It was like $10,000, or excuse me, 10,000 Bitcoin to buy a pizza. Now, if you do the math, that is the most expensive pizza ever sold in the history of the world. Because 10,000 Bitcoin in today's economy at 50,000 apiece is 500 million. Did I do those numbers right? It's an insane, right? So nobody knew that back then, but the idea of Bitcoin was born out of broken trust. It was the belief that the governments are not looking after our own best interests, so we've got to start something that we can have that they cannot take away and they cannot control. Do you know that your dollar is worth, like, I don't know the exact number, but the dollar is no longer actually worth $1. Now, we call it $1, but the buying power is something like 17 cents, right? Any economists in here that could tell me the exact number? Who studies this stuff? But you know that, right? Why? Because it has to do with what is made and also the circulation. Because the Federal Reserve for the last 10 years has said, hey, let's just print more money. Guess what happens when they print more money and give it away? It takes the money and it goes, well, there's more money now, so we have to devalue what it's worth. That's why inflation happens. That's why things cost more, because your dollar isn't as strong as it used to be. So you have a couple of things. You have the issue of the failed banks in 2008. You remember what happened there? They were doing these mortgages, knowingly selling these mortgages to people's retirement accounts and to people who just saw the heyday. By the way, the root of all evil is the love of money. So many, now, not everybody, but I'll just say this. The root of what happened in 2008 was pure greed. It was the love of money, which was the birth and the root of all kinds of evil that happened. People were taking their own lives. People were having all kinds of issues with relationships, and just, it was an awful, awful time if you were in the midst of that and you got caught by it. The start of Bitcoin was because of trust, was because of the banks, but what it became was even bigger than that. It became something that was an anti-bankers movement. So for the longest time, you had Bitcoin, and then you had all of these other cryptocurrencies, and Bitcoin held to the idea of, we're not going to do anything with legislation, we're not going to try to work with the banks, we're not going to try to be involved in governments because we don't want them to do what they always do. I don't know if you know this. I'm sure you do. If you're old enough to know this, you do. But our whole system is rigged. Our whole financial system is completely rigged, and it has been for well over 100 years. In 1910, Jekyll Island. This is over in Georgia. A bunch of really rich people and really powerful people got on trains separately, so they didn't travel together. They did it incognito, under the cover of darkness, so that nobody would find out. They met in Jekyll Island, and that's where they came up with the idea to create the Federal Reserve. Right? Federal Reserve has nothing to do with the government. It's a central bank. They're the ones that determine how much our money is worth. So who owns the Federal Reserve? A bunch of bankers. Do you feel like a pawn? Yeah. I mean, when you kind of see that, you're like, wait a minute, this whole system's rigged? Well, in 1944, you had Bretton Woods. That's when a bunch of really powerful, rich people came together and said, you know what? We need the U.S. dollar to be the reserve currency of the world. We want the dollar to lead all that happens in the world. So they came up with a couple of different solutions, one of which is that they would tie oil and our dollar together. That's why there's such an issue right now with China and with Russia and with Brazil. And there's actually this thing called, oh man, help me with the analogy. It's Brazil, Russia, BRICS, that's right. It's this group of nations that have said, you know what? We don't want the US dollar to be our reserve currency anymore. We want to trade with our own currency. Why? Because essentially, the U.S. is controlling the world by the fact that if the U.S. does well, the rest of the world does. If we don't, they don't, because the dollar is so intertwined. That's what a lot of the issue in Iran has been. Still is in a lot of ways. It's about oil. Because Iran should not be able to buy oil with Iranian dollars. It should only be what the agreement was, which, by the way, has run out. Y'all know more than about this than I do probably, but there was an agreement with Saudi Arabia and these other countries who produced oil, and they said, hey, we will protect you as long as you promise to only buy oil in US dollars. Why? Because that keeps the value of the US dollar up. That agreement ran out, and so now we're scrambling to figure out how do we keep the US dollar at the top. This is important. This is why cryptocurrency is such a big deal. Because if the US dollar tanks, the whole world tanks. The world's trying to figure out now, what can we do to keep us from being so volatile by one nation's currency controlling everything? There are a lot of people who believe that cryptocurrency is designed to answer that question. So there's a currency that is not a government-owned currency, but something that's over here, and because it's over here, all of us can use it, and it will theoretically level the playing field. Does that make sense? I hope I didn't just open more questions. Actually, I hope I did. I hope you're going, man, I got to figure this out. 1971, Nixon said, hey, we're in trouble because we need more dollars in the system, but we don't have enough gold to back it, and our rules say that there has to be gold for the value of all the dollars, so let's just take away the gold standard. And so we still say that it's backed by gold, but it's not. Matter of fact, nobody actually knows how much money is in our vaults. That was one of the things you might have seen on the news that Trump said, I'm gonna go in, I'm gonna count and see how much money we have in there. We still don't know. You think they're hiding something? He thinks they are, right? All right. So there's one other thing that you need to know. There's this system that was created, I believe it was around Bretton Woods, called the SWIFT system. And I don't remember what SWIFT means, but it basically means how you transfer money around the world. Because money, the world was getting more and more flat, there was more international trading, so there was this need to send money from one place to another. So the way the SWIFT system would work is, let's say that you own a yacht in China, and I want to buy it from you, and it's $5 million. In order to buy that yacht, you use the Chinese yuan. I use the US dollar. You don't want a US dollar, well you might, but you might not. You probably want the yuan because that's what you spend. So I'm then going to go to the bank and I'm going to say, hey, send $5 million to my friend in China because I'm buying this yacht. So that bank has to have $5 million to send over. But they have to keep the $5 million in their bank as well because they have to be able to cover if something happens. And so they basically have to have twice as much that they're gonna use. So there's a real liquidity problem. But they send it digitally, or not did, but they basically send it over, but through all the transfers, it takes anywhere from 3 days to maybe a week, and it costs hundreds of dollars to do that. So it goes to China. The guy in China says, hey, here's my $5 million, but I don't want it in US dollars. I want it in yuan. Okay, now I can give you the yacht. You know the problem with that? In those 5 days, the value of the dollar or the yuan could go up or down. So it doesn't matter if you're buying something for $2, but if you're buying something for $5 million, that could be an enormous amount of money gained or lost, depending on which side you were on. What cryptocurrency is designed to do, one particular, is replace the SWIFT system. Because today what's happening is, if I want to buy something in China for $5 million, I simply get online and I go, $5 million. And I send it. And I send it as a digital asset that doesn't lose value because in 2 or 3 seconds you have that in your account. And it cost me less than a penny. So I just deleted an entire week of waiting, and I just deleted all the risks, and I don't have to have the money on my side for liquidity issues. Why do you think this is a big deal? Because who loses when this new system comes about? The banks. Listen, I'm not a conspiracy theorist or whatever, but I'm just telling you, the more I read this, the more I realize that there are a few people who control the entire world, and they do it by money. How many of y'all are old enough to know that's true? What do they say? Whoever has the gold makes the rules. There's actually one step farther. Whoever makes the gold makes the rules. And so, all of this being said, there is right now a lot of tension going on in the area of what are we going to do with digital currency. There's a lot of uncertainty. And there are people in the U.S., in Congress, who are for it, and there are people who are against it. If you follow the numbers, most always the people for it or against it, it depends on who's paying them. And we're just going to get what they give us. But at some point, we're going to get it. We're going to get it. At some point, it's going to be. And I would go back to back in 1990. In 1990, not one person in this room, unless you have clearance with the Pentagon, you didn't have any idea what this thing called the internet was. The interwebs, right? 1990, not one of us. In 1991, I remember going to college for the first year ever, and they introduced us to this .edu, and I'm like, what the heck is this? I mean, I'm still using a typewriter at this point. A type what? Yeah, a typewriter. And now in 2026, not a single person in this room not only knows what it is, but we use it every single day, right? How many of you ever thought there'd be a day where you'd walk into the gas station and you'd pay for your gas like that with your phone? And it's such a thing that now you can just take your card, or you can just be in the proximity and it says, do you want to pay for this? Yes, you don't even have to touch it anymore. That's where we are, right? So I think it's putting your head in the sand if you really think that this isn't happening. That's my opinion. I could be wrong. So here are the fears. Volatility. The truth is, a whole lot of people lost a whole lot of money because of cryptocurrency. Because it was very speculative, still is, and because it was used as a way of gaining a lot of wealth really fast. And there were nefarious players. One of them would be SBX. What's his name? Anyways, he's in jail right now. His name is Sam. I can't remember his Sam Bankman-Fried, I think what it is. He's in jail because he basically had a pyramid scheme where he made all kinds of deals and then he took his money and ran. And everybody's like, oh, crypto is so volatile. Yes, it is, but the problem was the bad actor. And the problem actually was the legislation that didn't exist. So you have scams. You have energy use. It requires a ton of energy if you use proof of stake or proof of work. Losing your keys. So people who bought Bitcoin 10 years ago, it's suddenly now worth 50. By the way, Bitcoin was worth about $107,000 a piece in the last 6 or 8 months. So you want to talk about volatile? Went from 50,000 to 100,000 to 50,000. That's pretty volatile, right? So if you can buy it at the right time and sell it at the right time, you'll do well. If you do it the opposite, you're going to lose your shirt. There are people who mortgage their house so that they can buy Bitcoin, thinking that, hey, it's just going up and up and up, and the next day it totally falls and they lose everything. So that's not a good investment strategy to do that, by the way. You got losing your keys. So here's what that means. Let's say I buy one Bitcoin. I spend $50,000, I buy one Bitcoin. I have to do that by a website. There's a bunch of them out there. If I choose one, let's say Uphold. I buy one Bitcoin. That Bitcoin is now on Uphold. And I get a set of what's called private keys. They're a series of words. And those words are my keys to get into trading or spending or doing anything with my digital assets. If I lose those keys, if I forget them, if I don't write them down, or if I write them down and I have a fire and they disappear, guess what happens to my Bitcoin? It doesn't disappear. I just have to look at it through a window. and wish of all the things it could have been, because I'll never be able to get that. So people have lost a ton of money that's still there, they just can't get to it because they lost their keys. I heard of one guy who had a computer, and he had like 200,000 or whatever Bitcoin. It was given to him as a joke or something. Well, the computer died and he threw it away. And now he's like, I'm a multi-billionaire. Theoretically. Realistically, I am poor. Right? Another thing is crime. People do use digital assets in criminal engagements. But then again, so my argument to that is this. Well, U.S. dollar is used by criminals every day. Why is it different? It's really not. And the last one, there's no safety net. This is probably the biggest problem. Up until now, it has been the wild, wild west. Our government has, in my opinion, has been negligent in legislating and creating rules for digital assets. A lot of that, again, my opinion, based on what I've studied, is because too many people make too much money from the banks. And they know that it's a threat to it. So until they can figure out how to tax it, and until they can figure out how to fully track it, until they can figure out how to make sure that you're still under their control, they're not going to set you free to do it. That's just the hard and fast of it. But what's happened in the last year, really in the last 6 months, there are two pieces of legislation. The first one came out earlier in the year, or end of last year, which paved the way for one step. The next one is in Congress now that should be passed. It's called the Clarity Act, and it should be passed if they can get it through before August 1st. The Clarity Act is going to, I think, open the floodgates to where you're going to see it more and more and more. What the Clarity Act does is basically draw some boundaries and say, this is what it is, this is what you can do, and this is what you can't do. The reason your investment bankers don't give you the option to buy crypto is because they can't, because they don't know if they're allowed to, because the SEC has been negligent in determining what is and is not a security. Again, you can go down the rabbit hole on that if you want, but it is, look, the SEC is a sham. I don't know, not the football people. I'm talking about the security. It is a pay-to-play rigged system. Do y'all know that? Have y'all ever looked at that?
Sounds like the SEC.
Yeah, that's right. So we're talking about football too, right? And all you got to do is just do a little research. It's unbelievable. These government agencies that are supposed to protect us, the Security Exchange Commission is designed, their stated goal is to protect the consumer. They don't protect the consumer in so many of these cases. It's politics. Shocker, right? Here's where it genuinely helps. Here's why cryptocurrency is a good thing. This is the next slide. It's a shelter from inflation, theoretically at least. Because if the governments can't create more of it, they can't put more into the system, and they can't manipulate the value of what it is. So it actually is a hedge against, or shelter against inflation. It helps bank the unbanked. Right now, in other parts of the world, they do not have banks. They're still using the paper, and they're still hiding it in their pocket. People come and steal it. People beat them up and all kinds of stuff. There are women in Africa who have businesses who, because of digital assets, they can do it all on their phone, and they can not only have it secured, but they can also expand their business because they now have a way of transferring and utilizing their money. It really is opening up doors for business all over the world in a good way. So the poor are going to benefit as much as anybody else in that sense. Cheaper remittances. It's cheaper to send money. Have you ever had to send something Western Union? Yeah. That was a pain, wasn't it? Like $70 to send 1,000. I mean, it was a crazy amount. So right now, people are working in other countries. People on cruise ships are working. They can send money back home to their family, which, by the way, that's why most of these international folks are working on cruise ships. They go work on a cruise ship because they can make more money in 6 months than they can work for an entire year or two at home. they're sacrificing being gone so they can send money so that their children and their mother and all their other family members can eat. That's pretty noble, right? But the way they have to do it now is they have to send it through Western Union or something because there's a different currency, right? US dollar has to be transferred. With digital assets, they can just go boop, boop, and it's pennies. So they keep more money in their pocket. That's a good thing. And then with smart contracts, you can buy a house like you're paying for something with PayPal. Boom. Here's another thing that's coming out. Right now, there is it's heavy activity where everything is being put on the ledger. So everything is being tokenized. What that means is, if this computer costs, let's say this computer is a $100,000 computer, because it's a super duper computer, right? I can't afford this computer, but I do need to use it periodically. I can take this $100,000 computer, or whoever owns it, and they can say, we're going to do shares of this computer. This $100,000 computer is going to be owned by 10 people who pay $10,000 each, and each person who buys part of it will get to use it for a certain amount of time based on what we agree on. So 10 of us can buy this $100,000 computer because it's all digital, done through the blockchain, done through digital contracts, and done through digital payments. That's actually a good thing, because you can buy a piece of something. You don't have to buy the whole thing. What does that do? That helps you to buy things that actually have value that's increasing. Does that make sense? Like, I foresee a day where a ball team is going to be owned, kind of like Wisconsin, right? It's going to be owned by the people of the city. That's a good thing. You can do that because you just buy a little piece. All right. So, Wild West to regulation. Here are just some of the regulation things that have happened. Governments have stopped ignoring crypto and they've started governing it because they've had to. They've realized that this thing is not stopping because the people want it. So we better start regulating it. But in regulating it, we need to figure out how do we make money off of it. So the U.S. Sort tokens into securities and commodities. That's the SEC that we're talking about. El Salvador actually made Bitcoin legal tender. That's never happened before until they did it. European Union passed a comprehensive crypto framework, and China banned crypto completely, and then they created their own crypto called a CBDC. Now listen, you're going to hear this term a lot. A CBDC is a central bank digital currency. The U.S. passed legislation that does not allow us to have a CBDC until 2030. Now, I had a meeting, I don't know if I should tell you this or not. I will, just keep saying if you want it. I had a meeting today with a business mentor of mine, and she has access to some people who do all kinds of forecasting all over the country. It's really, really like a high-end, brilliant group of people. And they're saying, now again, I'm not a prophet of doom, not a son of a prophet of doom. I'm just passing on information, do with it what you want. What they're saying is, somewhere around 2030, that we will likely see an economic collapse unlike anything we've ever seen before in the history of the world, far greater than even the Great Depression. That's what they're saying as these business people who all they do is forecast and look at models and look at trends and all that kind of stuff. Now, here's what I'm thinking. Doom 2030, no CBDC until 2030. What happens, now let's just play this out, right? Again, who knows? We'll find out, but who knows right now? How do you solve the problem of a collapse of a world economy where everything goes chaotic? Well, you create a currency that everybody now gets that puts everything back to level. Is it possible? It's possible. Is it going to happen? I don't know. We'll see. China, though, was totally against it because they couldn't control it. They created a CBDC so they could control it, and now they're making it a part of everyday life So much so that I think they're trying to use that as their answer to the reserve currency. Does that make sense so far? All right, let's go into one other section. The idea of surveillance, and somebody mentioned it last week afterwards, Skynet. So in China, surveillance is more than anywhere else in the world. In Shanghai, there's roughly one camera for every 1.6 residents in Shanghai. In all of China, I believe the number's like one camera for every 3. So why is that important? Because the cameras are looking at people and they're taking information and storing it on people. What are they storing? Everything. They're storing whether or not you got in line first when there was an elderly adult behind you. That's a minus next to your name. They're scoring whether or not you saw a piece of paper on the ground and you picked it up and threw it in the trash. That's a plus next to your name. They're scoring whether or not you walked into a building that might be a secret house church. That's a minus next to your name. They're scoring if you wore colors of national pride on a day of celebrating a leader in China. That's a plus next to your name. So in other words, these cameras are doing all that. How are they doing it? AI. The only way they can do that is because AI is developing towards facial recognition. And not just facial recognition, but it's recognizing what you're saying by reading your lips and by listening. It's also recognizing or predicting what you're thinking based on how you're interacting. Are you acting nervous when you're talking to a police officer? That puts you on a list. Are you excited when you hear that a national leader died? That puts you on a list. Now, you might be saying, Jeff, this is crazy. This is like Terminator stuff. Yeah, it really is. And I'll prove it to you. There's a place called Xinjiang. I'm not sure if I'm saying that right. But there is a group of Muslims that live there that are under severe and intense persecution by the Chinese government. They are pressing in on them like never before. They can't move. They can't do anything. They can hardly afford to eat. Why are they doing this? I think, personally, it's a test. They're trying to see, how do we manage this system? By the way, if you're always seen, what are you going to do? Exactly what you're told to do, and exactly what you're expected to do. Now, you might say, well, that's China. That's China. That's not the U.S. Can you just think about that for one moment? If you go to Chicago, you're being watched every street corner, every traffic light. If you go to New York City, same thing. Interstate 10. Did I just hear that? Who said that?
Cameras.
Yeah, we got cameras in Gulf Breeze. I remember watching one of those shows where the guy ran a red light where he was going too fast on his motorcycle and he got a ticket in his head. He's like, you've been fined $100. We're taking it out of your bank account now. And I'm like, man, that would be terrible. Well, it's here. It's here, right? Total visibility and total financial control, total visibility and total financial control is total control. When you can't do anything without the government knowing, and when you can't spend anything without the government knowing, and when they can choose to take away or give based on what they decide you deserve, you're under total control. Now, that is exactly what's going on in China right now. Exactly. And I don't know if you've listened to some of the people who want to be elected, but that's exactly what they want to do here. Am I right? That's exactly what they want to do, right? Have you ever heard of UBI? That's not an infection. It's a different universal basic income. There is a huge push right now for a UBI, where everybody gets a universal basic income. What happens when people don't have to work? They just get money put into their account every day. You get a trust fund baby. And what does a trust fund baby do? Nothing except for live for himself. right? I mean, that maybe you might have the occasional nice guy, but at the end of the day, if you don't work, you become selfish. You look for pleasure. You look for, what do I do with myself today? And then you can flip it around and go, we're going to give you a UBI if you agree to be the trash guy. As long as you show up and ride this trash truck, or as long as you show up and you be a nurse at this hospital, as long as you show up and you teach this class, you will continue to get your UBI. But if you choose not to do our assignment, then we're not going to give you a UBI. If you don't get your UBI, how are you going to live? So what does this have to do with us? Well, I'm really, really glad you asked. Revelation 13. How am I doing on time? Oh, man, I got like 9 minutes. And remember, Daniel 7 says the same thing. 2 Thessalonians chapter 2 says the same thing. It has the same basic point. In Revelation chapter 13, it says this, and I saw a beast coming out of the sea. It had 10 horns and 7 heads. On its horns were 10 crowns, and on its heads were blasphemous names. The beast I saw was like a leopard, its feet were like a bear's, and its mouth was like a lion's mouth. The dragon gave the beast his power, his throne, and great authority. One of its heads appeared to be fatally wounded, but its fatal wound was healed. The whole earth was amazed and followed the beast. They worshipped the dragon because he gave authority to the beast, and they worshipped the beast, saying, who is like the beast? Who is able to wage war against it? All right, so out of the sea. The sea is a way of the scripture saying out of the nations, out of the peoples. And the scripture tells us that for a time, the beast is given authority over all the nations, all the peoples, all the languages, right? So the sea gave up the beast. Who is the beast? The beast is what we would call the Antichrist. Antichrist doesn't necessarily just mean against Christ. It's a counterfeit Christ. It's someone who comes in to be the Messiah. Someone who comes in to bring all things together. The beast was given, and by the way, we think of beast as someone who's this gnarly, nasty, fire-breathing thing, right? But the beast will be incredibly handsome or beautiful. Could be a woman, I don't know. The beast is going to be somebody that's attractive. It's not going to repulse people, because if it did, people wouldn't follow him, right? So it'll be somebody that everybody looks at and goes, huh, look at them. Where does the beast get its power? From the dragon. The dragon is Satan himself. So you have this picture that John is presenting here. He's saying Satan is going to have one last push. And he's going to give, he's going to bring up this beast, this ruler. And the beast's job, this Antichrist job, is to cause the earth to worship Satan. Does that sound familiar? That was the problem in the beginning. In the beginning, the enemy, the devil said, look, I don't think you should get all the worship, God. I mean, it wasn't with that language, but essentially it was, why do you get all the worship? I'm beautiful. I should get some of the worship too. I want you to share your glory. And God said, no, I don't share my glory with anybody. Cast him out. So he's just doing what he's always done. He wants to be worshipped, and the way to do that is to get the whole world to worship. Now, this beast is going to have a wound on his head. It's a fatal wound. And I think what will wow the whole world is when that fatal wound is healed and he will live again, right? What does that remind you of? Resurrection of Jesus. You know the thing about the devil? He does not have the ability to create anything. He only has the ability to copy things. He's a mimicker. He's a great pretender. He doesn't have the ability to give life. He only has the ability to make someone feel differently. Maybe that's not the way to say it. He can't create life. He can just breathe on them a little bit, right? And so you have this setup here where the world is looking at this one man, but then, in the next verse, verse 5, the beast was given a mouth to utter boast and blasphemies. It was allowed to exercise authority for 42 months. Who allowed it? God. Because the Bible tells us that Jesus has all authority in heaven, on earth, and under the earth. It's all been given to him. Right? So if the enemy has the authority, what did Jesus do? He gave him the authority. Why do you think that happens? Why do you think the devil would be given authority over all nations, over all people? Why? It says that he was given authority and power over all people except those whose names were written in the Lamb's Book of Life. So those who knew Jesus, he doesn't have authority over them, just everything and everybody else. Why would God do that? What's your thought?
So people would have to choose.
So people would have to choose? Maybe so. I kind of think that it's so that the devil could never go back and complain, yeah, but I never had real authority. I think maybe God is going, you know what? You think you deserve to be God? I'm going to give you 42 months to try. We'll see what you can do. Maybe, maybe not. I don't know. It doesn't tell us why. It just tells us that that's what happened. So for 42 months, that's 3.5 years. And it began to speak blasphemies. This is verse 6. Against God, to blaspheme his name and his dwelling, those who dwell in heaven. And it was permitted to wage war against the saints and to conquer them. It was also given authority for every tribe, people, language, and nation. Let me ask you a question. If it says to wage war against the saints, how is it that we can be raptured before? Did I step in something? Because, you know, we watch movies and they talk about a pre-tribulation rapture, right? God takes us all away. We don't have to deal with any of this stuff. I'm just wondering, what saints is he talking about there? Right? You know with me? Right? Now, here's the deal. We don't know. Because there are other things that would give us an indication, yeah, we will be brought up. But it makes you ask the question, why do I believe what I believe? Here's what I don't really care what you believe, as long as you can defend it biblically. And I don't mean I don't care. I mean, I want you to wrestle with the text. I want you to come up to a reasonable explanation based on your study of the Scripture. Because at the end of the day, whether it's pre-tribulation, mid-tribulation, or post-tribulation, we're all going to end up in the same spot if we know Jesus. Right? Where it might matter is that you might be surprised if you're enduring the tribulation and you were like, man, I sure thought we'd be gone by now. That's where it might matter. But at that point, you're in it, so you deal with it, right? So, all those who live on the earth will worship it, and everyone whose name is not written from the foundation of the world in the book of life, who was slaughtered. Here's the thing. All who live on the earth will worship it. How do you suppose that works? How do you get everybody on earth to worship one person? You control them. You control them by what they think, which is what information they get. And you control them by always seeing them. They can never get away from you. The eye in the sky is always seeing you. And you control them by what they can and cannot buy and how they can and cannot live. When they control you, you become subservient and you become obedient. And if they can convince you, which we're going to see next, that all of this is being done for our good, then it turns into not just obedience, but it turns into worship. So, the next thing says this, verse 11. Then I saw another beast coming out of the north, and it had 2 horns like a lamb, but it spoke like a dragon. Interesting, isn't it? You have this next picture, another small horn coming up, and it's a lamb and a dragon. Does that sound kind of familiar? Half of it anyways? You would have a lion and a lamb, right? That's Jesus. But this is a lamb and a dragon. Dragons are not good. It's this two-sided. I am able to say nice things, but I'm also wicked and evil on the inside. So what I say is good, but what I do is evil. That's the picture you have. This small horn that comes up exercises all authority of the first beast on its behalf, and it compels the earth and those who live on it to worship the first beast whose fatal wound was healed. It also performs great signs, even causing fire to come down from heaven to earth in front of the people. So in other words, if you read this, essentially what this smaller beast is doing is a prophet, or it's one who props up the first beast. This is more of a religious or more of a personal antichrist, if you will. So you have the Antichrist, and then you have this let's call him a preacher Antichrist, who says, you got to believe him, you got to believe him, you got to believe him. How do you think that person is going to influence everybody? Because if you keep going down the scripture, we're out of time, but if you keep going to the scripture, it talks about the fact that he gives breath to the image of the beast, and he also causes them to speak, and whoever would not worship, they would be killed. How does that happen? It happens through AI and digital manipulation. Because everybody gets information now digitally, right? That we talked about last week. Deep fakes is something where you look at it and you go, I know that person, there's no way they said that, but I'm watching them say it and I'm hearing them with my own eyes. I cannot believe they said that. That's how the great deception happens. Could that have ever happened before now? I don't think it could have. And where does the cryptocurrency come in? The very last verse, it says this. It says that we will not be able. Verse 17. Well, actually, I shouldn't skip not the most important part, but I shouldn't skip the really important part. In verse 16, and it makes everyone, small and great, rich and poor, free and slave, to receive a mark on the right hand or on his forehead, so that no one can buy or sell unless he has the mark, the beast's name, or the number of his name. What's that number? 666, right? You want to know something interesting? I saw this today. Check this out. Now, this is not a declaration. This is pure coincidence, but I think you'll find it interesting. So if you take the alphabet and the letter A, and each letter is given multiples of 6, so that A is 6, B is 12, C is 18, and so on and so forth, all the way through 26 letters. Check this out. C is 18, O is 90, M is 78, P is 96, U is 126, T is 120, E is 30, R is 108. Total that up, 666. I just spelled computer. Did you catch that? Now look, don't take that one to the bank, but I do find it interesting that in the numerology of computer, you find 6. I don't know, that's crazy. Somehow or another, AI and digital assets is going to be used to control the population. And when you come to a one world government, you have to be able to control the population. And when it gets to a point where one person has to be worshipped by everyone, the only way to do that is through control. So, what does that do? Where does that leave us? That leaves us remembering that technology is neutral. The trajectory is not. Neither AI nor cryptocurrency is evil. It's amoral. That means there's no morality. The men and women behind it determines if it's evil or good. So for you and for me, I would go back to Joshua chapter 1. God told Joshua, you're going to lead these people into a new land. It's going to be unlike anything that they've ever seen. It's going to be scary. It's going to be giants. But I'm with you. Be strong. Be courageous. And 3 times, do not fear, do not fear, do not fear. Church, do not fear. Because did you notice the part in Revelation 13 where God said, everyone on earth will worship the beast, and they will be under the authority of the beast, except you and me, if you know Jesus. You and me, we're okay. Because God is our Father. Here's another interesting thing that I found. So the number 6 is the number given to man, for man, right? The number 7 is the number given for perfection or completeness, right? So number 6 is man, and also the mark of the beast is 666. The enemy is going to do everything he can, but the highest he can get, the farthest he can get, is a 6. And when God decides it's time, he's going to come in and declare number 7. He will always be number 7. 6 will never defeat number 7. So you and I have nothing to worry about. That's why we must believe. Amen? Amen. Well, thank you for being here. I'm 3 minutes late. Darn. But here, Justin actually needs to share a prayer request. Thanks for being here tonight. You guys have a great night.
All right, well, thank you, Jeff, for coming. We were supposed to be in Uganda, and so he was going to be here on Wednesday nights, and I'm grateful he committed to come and do this anyway. So